a little sensitive. That's hate. I got a title, "The Dangers of Hate," but I don't know if that's really what it's going to be. It could. I think that would include it, but let's just go with hate for our lesson's title today. We're going to be in Leviticus chapter 19. Oh, Sunday school ready is ready. Leviticus chapter 19. Verse number 14 says, "Thou shalt not curse the deaf, nor put a stumbling block before the blind, but shalt fear thy God. I am the Lord. Ye shall do no unrighteousness in judgment. Thou shalt not respect the person of the poor, nor honor the person of the mighty, but in righteousness shalt thou judge thy neighbor. Thou shalt not go up and down as a talebearer among thy people, neither shalt thou stand against the blood of thy neighbor. I am the Lord. Thou shalt not hate thy neighbor in thine heart. Thou shalt in any wise rebuke thy neighbor, and not suffer sin upon him. Thou shalt not avenge, nor bear any grudge against the children of thy people, but thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. I am the Lord." So today we're going to talk about hate. There's a lot of hate is one of those emotions that we all have. And it's one that if I can be completely honest, I think we don't admit enough that we have. I think we don't want to admit that we hate something or hate somebody. I think to some degree we do. It's a strong emotion. It's part of our being. The Lord Himself even shows hate. But I believe that how we use this emotion is important, because I do believe there is a right place for it, but there's also a wrong place for it. And this world today, I'd go on a limb and say that the majority of this world does hate, hates things and people unrighteously. It's a hard this is a hard thing to talk about, because I don't feel right talking about it, because I know I'm guilty of it a lot. If any of you are like me, you probably tend to hold on to some things. Maybe you kind of stew on some stuff, and you just get hard feelings toward a person or toward a certain thing. It takes up so much of our time and energy. But we're gonna go over some of the definitions of what hate is. Just by googling it, here's the definition I found: an intense or passionate dislike. In most cases, it's a passionate dislike so much to where it demands action. And we've seen that lived out in a lot of people. They hate something, and they'll act upon that hate. A funny thing that I found out about this when researching that word, sometimes, like, if you search it up on the internet, you'll get little pictures that show up on the right side of it, of like of kind of representing what you're searching for. You want to know what I found? You want to know what the first image was I found of the word hate or hatred? It was two Civil War soldiers fighting each other. That cut me deep. To think that the symbolism of hatred was just two American soldiers from the North and South killing each other. And I know that's a sensitive topic to talk about. I don't know who grew up in the short North or the South, and frankly I don't care, because the point is, that's a sad place to be. In retrospect, to see that our country was killing each other, that is a sad place to be. I grew up on one part of it, and I didn't have an opinion one way or the other. I just thought it was a stupid war to begin with. And then I think I went down to Mississippi one time for a conference, and a lot of them, and I was shocked at I was shocked at some of the opinions that I heard, which I wasn't part of any of it. I was just there. You know how I'm like. I'm just there. I don't really add to anything. When I was listening to these things, it shocked me that people have such an authoritative standpoint on how things happened. Which I'm not there. I'm not here to debate that, but the fact that that's those opinions still resonate today, years after the war's been over, that is remarkable. And I don't use that word in a positive light. That is a crazy thing to think about. That after so many years, people still hold on to that. In intense or in a passionate dislike. Man, it is crazy. And to be a little more controversial, you know what else I found tied to that search topic? The LGBT and propaganda stuff. On both sides, I've seen hate for those that support it and those that are against it. It's if you don't know what it is, just look it up. Um, a lot of people are for it. A lot of people are against it. Us as a church, I think we should be against it because it represents a lot of wickedness and a lot of sin. I think that will probably that's a runner-up to the Civil War, and I pray that we have some kind of I pray that we show enough love to combat that hatred. But that's all I'll say on that because I know we got other things to cover. So we know the definition of hate. The Bible's definition, it it is a strong dislike toward wickedness or wrongdoing. A lot of times it's used as condemnation. Like you look in the Old Testament, they left no room for wickedness. It was pretty much commended. Hatred for the wickedness of that people committed what was the thing that they did. And the more we talk about that, let's go into the objects of hatred. Number one, the first object of hatred is sin. As we just said, it's happened in the Bible before. Numbers chapter 35. And this is more of the laws to the children of Israel regarding murder. Verse number 19. If the revenger of, well, I should probably back up because there's a lot more to this. Verse 16. If he smite him with an instrument of iron so that he die, he is a murderer. The murderer shall surely be put to death. And if he smite him with throwing a stone, wherewith he may die, and he die, he is a murderer. The murderer shall surely be put to death. Or if he smite him with an hand weapon of wood, wherewith he may die, and he die, he is a murderer. The murderer shall surely be put to death. The revenger of blood himself shall slay the murderer. When he meeteth him, he shall slay him. So we have a revenger of blood. So if a man commits murder, we got this man that will go out there and see him once he catches sight of him. Because he committed murder, something that is very wrong. But if he thrust him of hatred, or hurl at him or hurl at him by laying of weight, that he die, or in enmity smite him with his hand, that he die, he that smote him shall surely be put to death, for he is a murderer. The revenger of blood shall slay the murderer wherewith he meeteth him. Here we got murderer with the death. I may be reading this wrong, But you can't, he should pay his sentence because he murdered somebody, not because of any personal issue that he had with that person. Let's go to Psalm chapter 97, or Psalm 97. Psalm 97, verse number 10. Ye that love the Lord hate evil. He, he preserveth the souls of his saints. He delivereth them out of the hand of the wicked. Here's a more simple, direct command for us. If we love God, we have to hate evil. We have to hate sin. You've heard it be said before, hate the sin, not the sinner. Because why is it that we don't like people? It's because of the things that they do, right? They think there are things that they do, and this is probably a broad topic. There are things that they do that we don't like. If they treat others bad, maybe they abuse their family. Those are things we don't like. And we don't like people because of the things that they do. We got to hate the things that they do. And we can't buddy up to them when they're doing those things. That's just not right. It doesn't mean that we have to hate that person. For us that love the Lord, we have to hate evil. Psalm 101 says, I will sing of mercy and judgment unto thee, O Lord, will I sing. I will behave myself wisely in a perfect way. Oh, when wilt thou come unto me? I will walk within my house with a perfect heart. I will set no wicked thing before mine eyes. I hate the work of them that turn aside. It shall not cleave to me. And what does that word cleave there? To get a hold on. There's a lot of bad things that happen, and when we're exposed to it, sometimes it sticks to us. We then to copy it, see that it's okay. But we gotta protect ourselves. A froward heart shall depart from me. I will not know a wicked person. Whoso privily slandereth his neighbor, him will I cut off. Him that hath an high look and a proud heart will not I suffer. Mine eye shall be upon the faithful of the land, that they may dwell with me. He that walketh in a perfect way, he shall serve me. He that worketh deceit shall not dwell within my house. He that telleth lies shall not tarry in my sight. I will destroy all the wicked of the land, that I may cut off all the wicked doers from the city of the Lord. This is a pretty courageous statement from David. He's not going to allow wickedness in his city. As the Lord leads him, he won't let it happen. He will cut him off. There is such a once you understand what sin is, you can understand the I don't know what the word is. You can understand the hatred for it. You can understand how much we are against that thing. Because if we let sin in, it's going to get rid of us. It's going to destroy us. Y'all ever eat like a lifesaver? Once that thing gets wet, it starts to dissolve a little bit, right? Well, they'll treat our lives like that, and sin is water. You let a little bit of time get at it, it's going to wear you down, and it'll eventually break you. David here just doesn't want to leave any room for that. So the first object of hate, sin. I believe this is, in this area here, this is the most appropriate action for us to utilize hatred towards sin itself. Because it is sin itself that has separated us from God. And God hates sin. He even said it himself. God just hates sin. What is sin? It is the absence of God. It was sin that separated Adam and Eve from his fellowship. And we all know where sin came from. But when it came into mankind, it separated us forever. We shouldn't love sin. We should abhor it. It does so much harm. And then the other object of hate, probably guess this one, people. This is where hatred cannot be utilized in a righteous manner. Genesis 27:41, first recording of the word hate here. And we talked about Jacob and Esau before. Genesis chapter 27, verse 41. And Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing wherewith his father blessed him. And Esau said in his heart, the days of mourning for my father are at hand. Then will I slay my brother Jacob. It's interesting what happened here in this account. Jacob pretty much deceived his father to receive the blessing. Esau hated Jacob for that. I'm not here to say whether what Jacob did was right or wrong. All I know is that God allowed it to happen. But something here that we can probably talk about is Esau's reaction to this whole thing. I don't know where Esau stood in the eyes of God at this point in time, but it's pretty clear that what God thought of him after the fact, pretty much see why the Lord despised him. Esau hated Jacob because the blessing wherewith his father blessed him. Esau, he gave up his birth. I don't know. I won't go into that. Esau, he just gave up a lot of stuff. Accepting that this is what the Lord's will was, he probably could have done that. But he decided to despise his brother because of it. There's definitely a better way he could have reacted, but what he did here in his heart was not right. Let it be a reminder to us we can't let this happen to us as well. In the book of Proverbs, chapter 26, he that hateth dissembleth with his lips, and lay up deceit within him. When he speaketh fair, believe him not, for there are 7 abominations in his heart. And reference. We got to be careful, because if we hate, it's going to come out of us eventually. The things we talk about, the things that we even think about, they're not going to be good things. They're not edifying things. This happens to me a lot. If something's getting on my nerves, and it eats at me, first thing I want to do is complain to somebody. That's not right. That's not a right thing to do. There comes a time and place where you need to just talk to someone about some problems you're dealing with. But when you're to the point where you're letting minor inconveniences get you so upset that you just complain about to someone else, nobody's gonna want to talk to you. Even if you start saying good things, people are like, what's going on? He's probably gonna start talking about something else too. We got to be careful what we allow into our hearts, because if we allow this hatred in our hearts for people, the grow. It's just going to get worse and worse. I got here, y'all probably know about this. It's called the triangle of hatred. And this is really more geared toward people. I'll read to you what the categories are. There's about 5 of them all together, from bottom to top. Part 1 of this triangle of hate is bias. Part number 2 is individual acts of prejudice. This is all starting to sound familiar, right? Part 3 in this triangle is discrimination. We start to separate people from society and look down upon them. Part number 4 of this is violence. It's not enough to just discriminate others. That hatred can also say we need to do harm to them. And look at the Hatfields and McCoys. It's probably a bad example, but they got to the point where they started beating each other up because they didn't like each other. And the last part, and the most tragic one, genocide. You may take this triangle and maybe apply it to different things in our society. But this is what hatred can lead to. It can lead to murder and death. What may be a simple bias today could be acts of murder tomorrow. It is such a sad thing. It is such a sad thing. Kind of go off the topic for a little bit. What about comparative hate? Anybody know what that could be? This is something that when I was researching this, I thought, oh, this is a pretty good thing to discuss because go to Matthew chapter 10, verse 37. He that loveth father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. And he that loveth son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. This is Jesus speaking. He that taketh not his cross and followeth after me is not worthy of me. And in Luke chapter 14, verse 26, goes more into this. Luke 14, 26. If any man come to me and hate not his father and mother and wife and children and brethren and sisters, yea, and his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. What does that mean there? Does Jesus want us to hate others? Didn't the Bible just openly condemn hatred in the Old Testament? What does this mean? This is kind of where I got the word comparative hate in here because the application for this word here is that when you compare our love for Christ to others, it needs to appear as if we hate our family and our friends. It doesn't mean that we hate them. That's not what Jesus is coming at all. Whenever you love a sport, you tend to ignore everything else, right? I'm sure a lot of wives were frustrated at their husbands when they're watching the Super Bowl and they paid her no attention to mine. You probably might think that he hates her, right? I don't know if anyone here has ever been in that situation, but whenever you start neglecting your family, neglecting your responsibilities, and neglecting your friends and neighbors, they might think that you don't like them as much. But in this case here, if you want to follow Jesus, he's got to be number one in your life. And it's not an easy thing to feel. I must confess to you, I don't like this feeling. I don't like the thought of my friends not liking me because I have no time for them. I'm the one that wrote down on that list misrepresentation. I hate misrepresentation probably more than anyone in this room. If I want people to have an opinion about me, I want it to be because of my actions alone and not anyone else's. But there comes a time where we may have to just endure that. Because in order to love Christ and to follow God, you may have to look like you hate your family. It may look like that. It doesn't have to be true. You don't have to hate your friends and family and loved ones to follow the Lord. That's kind of what I want to clarify here, because that may be a question people may have. Carrying on. So the utility of hatred in the Bible. Let's kind of summarize real quick. The Old Testament, its hatred was for sin, wrongdoings, and for the enemies of God. The correct hatred was void of any personal malice or any kind of preference that they had. Anytime that any righteous anger was made, there was no personal malice involved. And there were plenty of examples in the Old Testament of people that acted in anger and committed things out of personal hurt. And that was always condemned. You think of Saul's descendants when they were cursing David for what he had done to Saul and Jonathan, which he didn't do anything to them, but he let that bitterness swell up in him that he started throwing things at him and started cursing at him. Now, he was very sincere in what he felt, but it was wrong because it all came out of personal hatred for David. It wasn't because of anything wrong that David did. The Old Testament has been very fierce on wickedness and sin, and I believe it righteously utilized the emotion of hate. The New Testament, for us as Christians today, the hatred needs to be for the sin itself. It is used on sin. It was never, ever used on an individual. Never. Any kind of righteous hatred, never toward them. We as Christians need to show the love of God to our neighbors, to this world. It's not easy sometimes, but we have to do it. 1 John 4:7-8 says that, beloved, let us love one another. For love is of God, and everyone that loveth is born of God and knoweth God. He that loveth not knoweth not God, for God is love. We are to love one another in the church. We are also to love our neighbors. They may not share the same love that we have, but that doesn't justify any wickedness toward. Last thing I'll cover today, we talked about what hate is, the objects of what hatred was, what the objects of hate, how it was used in the Old and New Testament. But what about us? How are we to receive hatred from others? Well, if we're not sinning against God, there's got to be a form of conviction there. If we're out of the will of God, and if we sin against Him, we need to make things right. But sometimes, whether you sin or whether you don't sin, sometimes we are mistreated, just like we had listed this in our devotion today. We receive wrongdoings and bad things to us. Not always for the cause of Christ. Sometimes it's very personal things. We must forgive the offender. There's plenty of verses that talk about this. I'll just pick out one today. Colossians chapter 3, verse 12 through 15. Put on therefore, as the elect of God, holy and beloved, vows of mercies, kindness, humbleness, meekness, and long-suffering, forbearing one another and forgiving one another. If any man have a quarrel against any, even as Christ forgave you, so also do ye. And above all else, and above all these things, put on charity, which is the bond of perfectness. And let the peace of God rule in your hearts, to the which also ye are called in one body, and be ye. We got to forgive our enemies and our offenders. That is a hard thing to do. As of late, I'm finding it hard to forgive others. It's not easy sometimes. I'm trying to get better at it, but we got to do it. we don't, we're not going to have any peace in our life. There won't be any. And the bad, and for those of you that are vindictive, the worst part of it is that the people that did you wrong, they're not going to know one way or the other. You're only going to hurt yourself. You're the only one that's going to be suffering from that because they could do you wrong and never think of you again. And if you're here today, maybe you're listening online, and maybe you've done somebody wrong. Think about this. You're probably spreading it within them a seed of hate, and you may never think of them again. You may never see them again until one day someone comes up to you and mugs you and jumps you and beats you up because of something you did to them 20 years ago. It won't happen every time, but and it may be an outrageous example, but we got to be careful what we tell others. Because within each and every one of us, there's a seed. And if we water that thing with bitterness and envy, we're going to spread the thing into something we can't control. But if we nip that thing at the bud, as good old Barney Fife would say, we'll put an end to that stuff. We can let the peace of God dwell in our hearts. Cast out the wrongdoing, just like we mentioned today. And ultimately, love the Lord. You got to love Him. If you love God, you're going to hate this, but you're going to start to learn to love people. Because even if Christ forgave us, we must forgive others. Even as Christ forgave you, so also do you. What a dangerous emotion hate is. It is so dangerous. But if it must be executed, let us execute it righteously and only do it against the sin that we see in this world. Because there's nothing wrong with hating things. I hate the fact that I hate a lot of stuff. Some personal, some big things, but we can't let that consume us. We just cannot let it consume us. First John chapter 5. We'll go there and then we should be done. Whosoever believeth that Jesus is the Christ is born of God, and everyone that loveth him that begat loveth him also that is begotten of him. By this we know that we love the children of God, when we love God and keep his commandments. For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not grievous. For whatsoever is born of God overcometh the world. And this is the victory that overcometh the world, even our faith. Let us love our Lord and our God. He is worthy to be praised. And if there's any suffering that we go through in this world, rest assured He will take care of it. But know that He will deal with it righteously and in justice. Until then, let's love one another and let's be tenderhearted and long-suffering to those that could do us harm. Because that love can go a long way. We can either continue the cycle of hate, or we can break that cycle now, start a new cycle of love and peace. I know that may sound like a dreamer's work, but I believe it can be accomplished if we love God. That's all I got for today's lesson. And thank you all for listening to me this month. I really appreciate the time, and I really appreciate these topics that we go over. They may not have been very deep, but hopefully they are just reminders of how we should act and live in this world. Well, may the Lord be glorified. And if y'all got any questions, just talk to me. If I got something wrong, do let me know. I mean, I'm not a scholar. I don't pretend to have any authority on the scriptures. But if I do say anything amiss, do let me know. All right, let's go ahead and close in a word of prayer. Andy, would you?